So my name is Crystal Jackson Parker. I am a Baltimore native, born, raised, um, education through Baltimore City Public Schools. And I'm a community organizer and advocate within all of Baltimore City. Primarily, a lot of my interest focuses on the West Baltimore corridor, where I am the president and executive director for the North Avenue and Hilton Street Business and Community Task Force. And our predominant signature in programming is utilizing in the environment to manage spaces in public safety and public health through an environmental, mental health, and wellness lens. We provide opportunities for summer youth programming, and we also are very much involved in the space of intergenerational relationships as it comes to community development and community networking. I'm also am the current director of assets management for the Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation, which includes me facilitating and overseeing all of their assets, which includes 3 multifamily dwelling units, the Hebrew Orphan Asylum, which we are 100% owners of, which we were able, through a lot of time and effort, to redevelop into a world-renowned, upgraded building, and preserving a lot of its historical value and character inside. And then we recently opened what is the newest brand food hall in Baltimore City, which is owned and operated in conjunction with Neighborhood Housing Services, which we are 2 nonprofits that came together to form an LLC from a community lens, a community effort to utilize the old original actual Walbrook lumber mill. So we have a space for 7 vendors, 6 food vendors, and 1 small lounge area. Pretty much every vendor is either has some type of ownership centered around a female um, female centered owner type of brand, but everybody is born and raised Baltimore and near community. So that is what I do for the CDC as well. And then from that, just involved in a lot of progressive movements throughout the city and state, advocating for healthcare and wellness, environment, um, reentry, and new ways of dealing with public safety and public health.
Okay. So I know you had mentioned the importance of community development. What do you feel like the role in organizations that do community development is, but also why is it important that when it comes to a lot of conversations around preserving Baltimore's historical value, is it important for native Baltimoreans and people from the community to be able to talk?
Oh, excellent question. So, from a standpoint of developers, and I know a lot of times, we can be hard pressed about people who come into community who are considered outsiders or transplants. But I believe, my focus is, like I said, I'm Baltimore born and raised, and Baltimore has a very rich history that is well overlooked. It is a history that is worthy of it being sustained, and particularly from the lens of Black and Brown communities, that basically, when you even talk about places as far as the downtown area, though the downtown area was historically African American space where we owned homes. And so as things progressed and changed, and as redlining, which is a brainchild of Baltimore City, when that came into play, those communities were divided. They were divided between racial lines. What you did see a lot is not a lot of the same types of infusion of resources in those communities around sustainability. And then you had communities where you would have perhaps more affluent communities that were juxtaposed against less affluent communities. You had a lot of what is called the a flight. A lot of times when we within ourselves have gone away for higher education and degrees and stuff, we don't come back to our communities. That was one of the things that was very, very important to me. Most of the time that I've been away from community was to go and to get my college degree, but it was important for me to come back and bring that back to community. And so when we talk about saving the home that grandma paid and worked and toiled for, it's important that we not get ahead of ourselves as our own selves, and thinking that, oh, well, I don't want that piece of property because, it only costs, you know, $10,000 back in the day and let me move out to the county. Well, you can do that, but still maintain a property that's in the city. So that is a cause of a lot of the blight. Along with that, with the redlining, we have been locked out in traditionally Black and Brown communities from um, participating in things like historical tax credits and Main Street designations. So one of the things that I've also been working on, what the city has been working on for years, and the Coppin CDC was able to really push the envelope on, is something that we call the conservation district. And what the conservation district does is it is a pilot program. Recently, two of our council persons put in legislation, which was signed into law by Mayor Scott in September of this year. But what that would do is it would take away some of the roadblocks and obstacles for people in historically Black and brown and currently underserved communities to maintain the historical nature of their properties, and to also to enjoy those tax credits that come along with that. That is something that we have not traditionally seen. We've just been blocked out of. Along with that, because it's important to me from an environmental lens that we not just talk about spaces of housing, but we talk about what's green, what's alive around those things. One of the things that I have moved toward along with that from CHAPS is having conversations with the Department of Sustainability of, okay, so we get these historic tax credits, we get the conservation district. How do we maintain the landscaping around it? How do we continue the life outside to mirror the longevity of this historic structure in this building where people may live and dwell? Though that is one of the primary reasons why it is important for the conversations to be led and to be informed by people who are from the city. It is okay for a developer to come in with their areas of expertise and how you build this out, but the voice needs to be lent to the people that have lived here, the people who have legacy here, the people who want to be here, the people who now may be renting for 20 years in the neighborhood, but now have that opportunity to build their home in the same space where they have been renting for so long. That brings a different level of ownership, a different level of pride, a different level of sustainability, and it brings what we call that foundational legacy that you give and you transfer to for ancestry, for future generations. And that's why it's important for the information. What we get a lot of times is people coming in, surveying the land, and then coming and telling us what they are going to do with the spaces where we live, work, and where we play. Um, that is not acceptable. It's not acceptable on any level. The other thing is, unfortunately, those spaces where that's happening are spaces that I believe have, to some extent, intentionally been unaddressed and been allowed to continue to deteriorate. When you have a whole block that's deteriorating, or you have one or two houses, those houses are not addressed, and then it goes another house because nobody wants to live next to that one vacant. Then you have a whole block. So by the time you get the whole block, now the developer is sitting and waiting to come in to demolish everything and then raise something that is their idea, their vision, and that is not what community should be built on. And that's something that we have to be at the table to combat.
What do you feel like the disconnect is?
I think that a lot of times the disconnect is that because in a lot of the communities, well, one is because people that were born and reared in the community have left. They've just gone and done their own thing. Decisions of there's a better life or there's something else that I need to do outside of Baltimore, and then that's fine. But not leaving and not creating connections and sources of sustainability within the community. Like, we don't have a neighbor system anymore. It's like you knew Miss Crystal, you knew Mr. Frank, you knew John, their son, you knew their daughter. We don't have a lot. Your neighbors move in, you don't know who they are at all. We don't have that welcoming anymore, because at the end of the day, everybody's just trying to survive. And then when you don't have consistent levels of services in communities, and you continue to see the continuous deterioration, and when there are systems that are put in place for services that are supposed to address those needs, you either are not well informed of how to access them or utilize them, or they just don't work in the way that they should work consistently to show up in our communities. So there's a lot of disconnection. And with those disconnections, it lends an opportunity for speculation to just come in, to thrive and to take. And then you also have these narratives around crime, some of which are true. These narratives around deteriorating public health, a lot of which is true. But then when we look at the causes of those things, and I see I see a narrative where Baltimore is one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S. But I see people outside jogging at 3, 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning. So which one of those scenarios is true? Because if it's that dangerous, why are you outside at that time of morning and you're not going to work? You're just so we have to really look at what the true narrative is, and we have to be outside intentionally inside of our communities, reclaiming and rewriting the narratives ourselves. Exacerbation of continuous vacants has continued to build upon the sources of trauma, that everyday trauma of nobody comes here, nobody cares. So unlike perhaps myself, who knew what was there before and understands the history and the great deep, history of quote unquote Charm City, people in their, I would say, 30s and below, they didn't necessarily get to experience that, because for 20 years this whole vacant population has been allowed to grow and happen. um, So with the trauma of, we talk about a public health system. I think that I think that vacant houses has a huge impact on our public health system, how we think about things, our mindset of things, pollution, unnecessary trash and dumping systems. It opens up spaces for dumping to happen, and it also adds to the, I would say, the psychological trauma of, well, nobody cares. Because when you used to have Baltimore Clean Block, or you used to have Dunk One, and you used to have those things, and you go from quote unquote the city that reads to being branded as the city that bleeds, well, where is a young person coming in to understand that there used to be a city that reads? So more of the intentionality of intergenerational conversation, the intentionality of bringing our young people to the table to hear what their thought is. If they, one of the things I do in my summer youth works program is I have them walk the community, and as they walk the community, one day they walk, the next day they write, they may illustrate, and they get to create what they would want that block or those blocks to look like if they were able to put what they wanted there. And so just that simple exercise from a young person's perspective, age 13 to 22, gives you an insight of, though they don't know the history, there is a mindset of how I would love for my city and my space to look. What would start a healing and love for me of my block and my city? So those are some things that I know that in the spaces that people stay in and in the spaces that people are day in and day out. When you're outside and you're cleaning up and people say, oh, I don't know why you're wasting your time cleaning that up because it's going to be trashy again tomorrow. But you keep going outside and you keep cleaning up. So as you keep going outside and you keep cleaning up, the people that were outside saying, oh, they start to come and they start to clean up with you or for you. I remember when I moved in my space where I actually reside now, and across the street there was this big like empty lot, and somebody came to my home and, how are you doing? How do you like it here? And they said, isn't it depressing that you look out every day and you see this big old empty blighted lot in front of across from your window? And my response to them was, absolutely not. When I look outside, what I see is endless possibilities of what could be. So now what we have in that space is we have a 65 unit multifamily dwelling with a specific emphasis on how do we get from rental space in a 65 unit multifamily dwelling to having now a pipeline of people that will move out into other spaces and community into home ownership. Behind that, what I discovered when I was planning for one of my programs in the environmental space is we have a 15 already set raised bed enclosed garden area where we now grow fresh fruits and vegetables. for the community. So when you talk about endless possibilities, you have to be willing to move into the space of what you envision creating. You have to be able to do whatever it takes, or think outside of the box, and gather resources and peoples and mindsets to create the space that you envision being in as a community, as a person. First, it starts with a person, then it starts with relationship, then you're building a relationship, then you're building a family, then you're building a community. And that's how it starts.